I'm listening to you. I'm a plumber working on a site, and we were clearing a drain and pulled out probably about 10 to 15 pounds of something that looked like meat, and we don't know what it is. This 911 call takes us to December 29, 2017, to a house on Macmillan Drive in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada. The caller, a plumber, encountered a disturbing find: human flesh clogging the drain. The subsequent investigation led the police to the downstairs neighbor, a 45-year-old man with a deep and complex backstory that requires further examination. Who did the remains belong to, and how did they end up in the bathroom plumbing? In 2017, a horrific crime occurred in Oshawa that shook the entire country to its core. On September 11th, in Lake Ontario near Oshawa Harbor, a disturbing discovery was made. An 11-year-old boy fishing with his grandfather noticed a floating torso in the water. Authorities immediately arrived at the scene, retrieved the torso, and began an investigation. Despite thorough searches conducted by marine units, no other body parts were found. An autopsy was performed, which showed that the torso belonged to a woman, but the cause of death could not be determined. Nevertheless, clear signs of trauma allowed the coroner to determine that it was a homicide. The absence of the head created significant difficulties in identifying the body, so the only possible option was DNA analysis. Only on November 9, 2017, 2 months after the disturbing find, the heartbreaking truth was revealed. The torso belonged to Rory Hatch, an 18-year-old pregnant resident of Oshawa who had gone missing at the end of August of that same year. Rory was born on July 9, 1999, and was her mother Shannon Dion's favorite. Not much is known about her father, but some of her relatives had a reputation for leading a daring lifestyle. Her grandfather Bernard, a former biker, gangster, and boxer, gained notoriety as the founder and national president of the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club. Rory's uncle Harley was also an active member of the Hells Angels, another motorcycle club. Despite these family connections, Rory's childhood was relatively calm. She was described as a kind and clever girl. In addition to her mother, Rory was very close to her godmother and Shannon's closest friend, Chrissy Melk. In early childhood, Rory excelled in school, and at 13, she even received the prestigious title of Army Cadet of the Year in her local unit. However, her life changed for the worse in her first year of high school when someone introduced her to drugs, which led to addiction. In the following years, Rory's life became turbulent. Drugs became an important part of her existence. Desperate to cope with the addiction, she turned to prostitution, which caused even more suffering for her mother Shannon. In turn, Shannon sought help from the Children's Aid Society to help her daughter overcome these difficulties. Fortunately, her efforts were successful in early 2017 when Rory finally began taking steps toward improving her life. She found a job, returned to school, and gained stability by moving in with her boyfriend Tony. Despite past difficulties, Rory was full of determination to turn her life around and find a better path for herself. In August 2017, Rory told her mother about her pregnancy. She really wanted to keep the child, and Shannon supported her, but she knew that her daughter had started using drugs again. On August 28th, near a shopping center, Rory met with Constable Christopher Kane. For many years, he had checked on the girl's well-being and made every effort to connect her with social services to help in her struggle. During their conversation, Rory said she had started using drugs again and was going on dates to pay for them. Deeply concerned about Rory's well-being, Constable Kane decided to find appropriate social services to help her, but unfortunately, by the time he returned, the girl had disappeared. On August 29, 2017, the day after meeting with the constable, a friend and her mother brought Rory to the hospital after a relapse of a mental disorder. Unfortunately, they couldn't stay with her for an unknown reason and left after a few minutes, leaving Rory alone in the hospital. Strangely, just 15 minutes later, she decided to leave the hospital grounds without waiting for the necessary medical help. Surveillance footage shows her calmly walking out of the hospital, which became the last confirmed evidence that she was alive. From that moment, her whereabouts were unknown. When Rory's family and friends received no word from her for several days, their concern grew. Fearing the worst, they filed a missing person report with the police, which led to citywide searches. They also distributed flyers with her photo throughout the area. Unfortunately, all attempts to find Rory Hatch remained futile until DNA linked the found torso to her, confirming the horrifying news that she had become a victim of a violent crime. But the case was far from over. The police still faced the complex task of finding the remaining parts of her body and piecing together the puzzle related to her tragic death. Success loomed on the horizon, but surprisingly, it happened in a way that exceeded all expectations. Just 2 months after the torso was discovered, a couple living in an upstairs apartment on Macmillan Drive experienced ongoing plumbing issues. The situation escalated to the point where, on December 29th, the couple had no choice but to call a plumber. Since no clog was found in the upstairs toilet, the plumbers asked for permission to enter the downstairs neighbor's apartment, a 45-year-old man named Adam Strong. As they entered the downstairs apartment, the air filled with an unpleasant smell. It wasn't like what they usually encountered. The smell was simply horrifying. The situation became even more alarming when Adam's behavior took on a nervous character. He paced the room, closely watching their every move and asking numerous questions. Although the plumbers were annoyed by his behavior, they chose to ignore him. Adam justified himself by saying he was just curious, as he had already tried to solve the problem but couldn't. They might have ignored him altogether, but what they found inside the pipe changed everything. To their horror, they extracted from there a disturbing pink flesh about 45 centimeters long with hair attached to it. Alarmed by the shocking find, they didn't waste time and immediately contacted the police to report what they had encountered. A few minutes later, police officers arrived at the apartment. They confirmed that the plumbers had indeed found human flesh. After gathering important information from the plumber and the concerned couple, the officers proceeded to talk to Adam Strong. During the conversation, they prepared for unexpected results. However, nothing could prepare them for what Adam said. He lowered his head and said that it was human flesh, and if they needed the rest of the body, it was in his freezer. He was immediately taken into custody, and the police began searching his apartment. It was nothing short of a house of horrors. Every inch was filled with dirt, and the air reeked of an unbearable smell of decomposition. In the bathroom, they found that Adam had removed the toilet, trying to solve the clog problem. However, in the bedroom, the most horrific discovery awaited them. In the freezer, they found the remains of a young woman, whose head was hidden in a bag. The body was in a state of decomposition, just as Adam had described. On the neck of the remains was a tattoo with the phrase, "I live," exactly the same as Rory Hatch's. Further DNA analysis confirmed that the remains found in Adam Strong's apartment belonged to Rory. There was no shortage of evidence of the girl's presence in the apartment. Her blood was on the wall and ceiling of Adam's bedroom, and his biological fluids were found on her remains. Her sneakers were found wrapped in plastic and stained with blood. The police also discovered that Adam had set up an improvised dissection table. Chills ran down their spines when they realized that this was where Adam had dismembered his victim. During the search, the police also found numerous intimate toys, handcuffs, knives, and an explosive device that turned out to be a homemade bomb. Fortunately, it was defused before any danger arose. No one could figure out where Adam had gotten it from. Unfortunately, due to the lack of direct evidence that Adam had killed Rory, the police could not charge him with murder. Instead, he was charged with improper interference with a body. It was time for the investigation to get to know the life of this 45-year-old man more closely. Little was known about Adam Strong, but he had moved into the rental apartment on Macmillan Drive in early 2007. For many years, Adam worked as a security guard on a film set in Oshawa and as a clerk at gas stations in 2 different locations in Ajax. Those who knew Adam Strong called him a weirdo with an arrogant character who thought he was smarter than he actually was. He was prone to talking incessantly, never knowing when to shut up. One of his former girlfriends, whose name is not disclosed, described him as manipulative and controlling. Adam's landlady, Eugenia Papadakis, also had an unpleasant experience dealing with him. So, in March 2017, after a house fire, she and her granddaughter came to inspect Strong's apartment in the house on Macmillan Drive. They found the apartment cluttered with food and other random items. Needless to say, the place shocked them to their core. In addition, Adam enthusiastically viewed adult videos and books, which clearly indicated his addiction to explicit content. Thanks to this, valuable insights into his psyche were obtained, shedding light on the dark, disturbing world that existed in his apartment. However, this was not enough to charge him with murder, so the detectives aimed for a confession. Early in the morning of December 30th, 2017, Detective Darren Shorts and Detective Doug conducted an interrogation of Adam Strong. By this time, he had already contacted his lawyer. The detectives understood that this was their only chance. The next day, a hearing for his release on bail was scheduled, and after that, they wouldn't be able to question him without a court order. They needed to get important information from Strong while the opportunity was still there. You told the officers that if you're looking for the rest. My question to you is, the person in the freezer, is that Rory? I don't want to answer that question. Okay, you say you don't want to answer that question, but you're shaking your head. Does that mean anything? No. Oh, you don't want to tell us your version of events? No, nothing. When the detectives began the interrogation, they didn't know what to expect. At least they assumed Adam would be nervous, since he had finally been caught. However, he was calm, collected, and most importantly, indifferent to the situation. But the biggest problem was getting information related to Rory Hatch. His stubbornness was baffling, especially considering that Adam had previously confessed that there were human remains in his freezer. The detectives, well aware that time was running out, resorted to another approach. They tried to touch on Adam's emotions, hoping to reach that part of him that might feel remorse or sympathy for the victim and her loved ones. Trying to evade the questions asked of him, Adam constantly changed the subject. But his answers were simply shocking. Can I have a napkin? No. Can I move to the table? Of course. What are you thinking about right now, Adam? I'd like to go diving. Yeah, think about it while you're here. You have a burden on your shoulders. Do you feel any? No burden on my shoulders at all. You're just, can I pour water even from? Yeah, great. Although they had gathered enough to establish that Rory Hatch had been in his apartment, their ultimate goal was to find out the truth about what happened and what led to her tragic fate. Unfortunately, Adam Strong turned out to be not as simple as they had hoped. He gave no answers to any questions related to Rory. How do you know Rory? Sorry, I'm not saying anything. Did you kill Rory? Sorry, I'm not saying anything. But will he be able to look straight at it? Keep the indifference. Can I flip this now? No, I want you to look at this. I looked. Everything stays here. Okay, fine. I'm not looking at this anymore. When playing on his conscience proved ineffective, the detectives resorted to his greed as a last hope to gain his trust. Oh, you want to eat with me? And I won't let you eat alone. Have you ever owned a gun? I don't like guns, but I like knives. Do you collect knives? I wouldn't say that, but I like knives. How many collectible knives do you have? Oh, I have this sword. Since Adam started answering questions, the detective tried to steer the conversation back to the murder investigation. Unfortunately, he reverted to his previous unwillingness. As the interrogation continued over the next 2 hours, it became increasingly clear that they were getting nowhere. Adam's refusal to provide any important information left more questions than answers. Seeing no success, they reluctantly decided to end the interrogation. How Rory Hatch crossed paths with Adam Strong remained a mystery. Fortunately for the detectives, Adam was not released on bail, which further solidified his custody. Meanwhile, the Durham police continued searching his home for evidence and leads. The autopsy report on Rory also allowed for a better understanding of the situation. There were numerous injuries on her body, including skull fractures, but the medical examiner could not definitively determine whether these wounds were inflicted before or after her death. The examination also showed the presence of drugs in her system at the time of death. Additionally, traces were found on her body indicating that some kind of immobilizing device had been used on her. In the house, detectives found a bent hammer with Rory's DNA. In their opinion, it was the likely murder weapon. However, this was not the most significant find. Just as the detectives thought they had examined everything, another astonishing discovery was made. In July 2018, 7 months after Adam's arrest, A hunting knife was found in a kitchen drawer in his home. It was covered in human tissue. As a result of the examination, it was revealed that the DNA found on the knife did not match Rory's. Instead, it belonged to another girl named Candace Fitzpatrick. Candace Fitzpatrick was born on February 3, 1989. Little is known about her early life. Her father, William Fitzpatrick, divorced her mother, whose name is not disclosed. After the divorce, William moved to Alberta, and Candace stayed with her mother in Oshawa. Her life took a turbulent turn, marked by a chaotic lifestyle. At some point, she disappeared from home, and her father went searching for her in Oshawa. Upon returning, Candace expressed a desire to live alone. By the time Candace turned 19 in 2008, her life had turned into chaos. Like Rory Hatch, she was a troubled girl who struggled with drugs and resorted to selling herself to finance her addiction. Candace often disappeared from home for several days or even weeks but always returned, until March 2008, when her family saw her for the last time. Increasingly concerned about her absence, William began actively searching for his daughter throughout the city. Surprisingly, the police were officially notified of Candace's disappearance only in 2010, 2 years after she went missing. William said that in 2008, he had repeatedly contacted the police about Candace, but due to her habits and lifestyle, they did not take her disappearance seriously. After 10 years of agonizing uncertainty and waiting, the family of Candace Fitzpatrick finally received the devastating news they had always feared. The undeniable similarity between these two girls went beyond their troubled lives. Their appearances were also strikingly similar. Ironically, despite their disappearances occurring 10 years apart, both met the same tragic fate at the hands of the same person. The heartbreaking thought: if Adam had not gone unnoticed for 10 years after Candace's death, Rory might still be alive today. Candace's remains have still not been found, and only one person held the key to unraveling this horrific mystery. They managed to convince the prosecutors to drop the initial charge against Adam Strong. Instead, he was charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of both Rory Hatch and Candace Fitzpatrick. This gave the detectives another opportunity to interrogate Adam. Understanding that the stakes were high, the Durham Regional Police Service brought in Detective Paul Mighton, a highly qualified and experienced investigator known for his expertise in handling complex and intricate cases. "How are you?" "Good, and you?" "I've had better days." "Oh, I'm sure." Paul Mighton, Adam Strong. On November 18, 2018, 11 months after the first interrogation, Adam Strong found himself being interrogated, and this was the most important one. To Detective Mighton's surprise, Adam voluntarily provided information about how he was treated in prison. "I'm amazed at how well I've been treated, except for a few staff members. This will continue today, yes?" "Yes." Detective Mighton saw it as a positive sign that Adam was at least willing to engage in conversation, even if he hadn't yet touched on the case. Drawing on his knowledge of Adam's temperament from the previous interrogation, he understood how important it was to establish rapport and gain his trust before moving on to the delicate details of the interrogation. So, Detective Mighton fulfilled Adam's request for food. "Without fries? You didn't ask for fries." "Oh, I said combo." "Oh, sorry." "It's okay. I've come to terms with it." Now that rapport had been established between them, Detective Mighton felt it was the right moment to start talking about the case. "How old was Rory?" 18. "How many body parts were you able to recover?" "Obviously the entire skeleton, right?" "Well, obviously everything that was in the house." "Yes, in the freezer, yes." "And how much of her were you able to pull out of the pipes?" "Not much at all." "Yes, that's what I was telling people. They say you're stupid, and I say, are you kidding? That's an amazing way. I just got greedy, that's all." The lack of remorse in Adam's behavior as he recounted his actions would have left any other person shocked. However, Detective Mighton knew it was better not to react to his words. Instead, he continued the interrogation. "So, the team is assembled. And as I said, Rory was last seen on August 29th. Okay. Torso of an unknown woman on September 11th. Yes. She said that deep down she knew it was her daughter. I read about it in an article." Understandably, he continued to deny that Rory was pregnant. He even admitted to holding her reproductive organs in his hands, claiming that she was not carrying a child at the time of her death. The fact that he was more concerned with proving himself right than taking responsibility for his own actions further revealed a disturbing aspect of his character. He was a person who absolutely did not care about human lives. In the process of proving his words, Adam inadvertently let slip something he hadn't intended to say. This became a pivotal moment in the case's history, as he revealed for the first time something that could incriminate him in murder. Incredibly, throughout the interrogation, Adam dropped crumbs of information to Meighton's great satisfaction, who was witnessing this. 8 hours after the start of the interrogation, Detective Paul Meighton decided to change tactics a bit. He provided Adam Strong with compelling evidence gathered against him. "You were waiting for a knock on the door. I thought, will I get away with it? But probably not. Yes. Again, I assumed that from the moment the plumbers started working. Yes, I thought, oh God. Did you sleep at night, or were you constantly thinking about it?" "I slept. We obviously searched the apartment and found something there that allowed us to assume we have the murder weapon." "Yes, in the apartment. In the apartment. Wow. Does that surprise you?" "Yes." At this point, the surprising aspect of this interrogation was not only that Adam was intrigued by the evidence provided, but also the degree of his excitement, which seemed almost unbelievable. Meighton maintained his engagement in the conversation. "So what number is this?" "This is the time when you start, as you said, Christmas Eve." "Yes." "You do this in frozen or partially thawed form." "Fully thawed." "That took a few hours, didn't it?" "No, I filled the bathtub with hot water." "Okay, over a couple of hours, I won't argue. I had to check the water several times on the planet." "Bathtub." "Yes, caught. I don't know if I should say this, but in the end, you caught me, and there's no escaping it. First it was one piece, then another, and so on." "Sorry, I don't remember." "Seriously, yes. For me, it wasn't important. Okay, I know this might seem heartless, but I just thought it would be like in 911. No, how much, you're just remembering this because it's so unusual. I didn't feel it at all." Adam was sure that the conversation between them was strictly limited to dismembering bodies. He had no idea that his indirect confessions and subtle revelations allowed the detectives to make crucial conclusions about the entire sequence of events related to the monstrous crimes. After 10 hours, the interrogation ended when Paul Meighton felt he had all the necessary information. On September 28, 2020, 12 years after Candace's disappearance and 3 years after Rory's, Adam Strong stood trial on charges of both murders. Despite all the evidence gathered against him, he pleaded not guilty to both charges. During the trial, the prosecution meticulously presented a wealth of evidence, including chilling interrogation recordings, in support of their case against Adam Strong. Testimony from 5 women who had been assaulted by him further strengthened the weight of the charges. Although Adam did not reveal details of Rory's death during the interrogation, the prosecution built their theories based on the available evidence. According to their version, Adam lured Rory to his home by promising money for intimacy. Once inside, he tied her up and brutally beat her with the hammer found in his home. Unfortunately, no one was upstairs at the time, so no one could hear her screams. After her tragic death, he dismembered her lifeless body and dumped the torso in Oshawa Harbor. Cell phone data allowed them to establish that Adam was in that area on September 4th, a week before Rory's torso was found, further strengthening the evidence against him. The prosecution also believed that Candace met the same fate at Adam's hands, but at that time, they had not yet found her remains. The defense, however, denied Adam's involvement in Rory's murder, claiming that her death resulted from an overdose. Adam simply tried to dispose of the body. As for Candace, the defense argued that there was insufficient evidence of her death in Adam's home. They also pointed to the limited size of the freezer, suggesting it could not hold the remains of 2 victims. Nevertheless, after carefully examining all the evidence, Judge Joseph DeLuca was firmly convinced of Adam Strong's involvement in the murder. He dissected the defense theories and concluded that the evidence presented by the prosecution was convincing and incriminating. In court, Adam tried to blame his actions on a difficult childhood. He claimed to have survived a traumatic assault at an early age, and that event left an indelible mark on his psyche. He even expressed condolences to the victims' families. But it turned out to be insincere. He demonstrated a disturbing level of indifference and lack of remorse for the lives taken. The evidence presented during Adam Strong's trial clearly showed that he was fully aware of the severity of his actions and the consequences they entailed. It was obvious that he knew exactly what he was doing and felt no remorse. In fact, he viewed prison as a real way out of a difficult situation due to loneliness and financial hardships. He was willing to trade his freedom for the necessities that prison could offer. It was established that Rory Hatch died during an assault. Adam Strong was found guilty of first-degree murder in relation to Rory Hatch's death. In relation to Candace Fitzpatrick's death, he was found guilty of manslaughter. In May 2021, Adam Strong was sentenced to life imprisonment. Additionally, he received an 18-year prison term to serve concurrently for the murder of Candace Fitzpatrick. This was the maximum possible sentence allowed under the country's legislation. Although it could not bring them back, the families felt that justice had prevailed. In July 2021, Strong provided important information about the location of Candace Fitzpatrick's remains. Acting on this tip on November 4, 2021, he accompanied the police to the area where, according to him, he had buried the body. Subsequently, on November 8, authorities managed to discover the remains. After conducting a forensic examination, on November 13th of that year, the remains were identified as those of Candace Fitzpatrick. The final identification was announced at a press conference on February 16, 2022. The reason for Adam Strong's sudden change of mood remains a mystery, but there is a suggestion that he wanted fame and recognition for his actions. Despite the tragic circumstances that brought them together, the Hatch and Fitzpatrick families support each other and find strength in healing, overcoming the heavy consequences of these horrific events. The cases of Rory Hatch and Candace Fitzpatrick have been solved, but the police suspect that Adam Strong may be involved in the deaths of other women. In June 2022, the police discovered certain physical evidence in Adam's apartment. However, they do not disclose specific details about these clues, keeping them secret while the investigation continues. Friends, what do you think about this horrific case? Write your opinion in the comments and also subscribe to my Telegram channel. Links will be in the description. We're not saying goodbye.